Hello there guys, and welcome to the third episode of TerryTalks, in which we are going to be covering photography basics. So, if you have just recently bought yourself your first camera and you want to learn how to use it, you came to the right place. My name is Teric and I'm a 25-year-old photographer living in Montenegro, if you ever heard about this country. And I have wanted to learn people how to use their cameras for some time, and I have just recently decided to start making videos teaching you guys photography basics in general. So in this video we are going to be covering most basic things, which are ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So those three things combined is what we call in photography exposure triangle, and each setting affects your final image in different kind of ways. So each settings you're going to be adjusting on based on what's your desired result. So for example, this is a Canon 5D Mark II and I'm using a prime lens. So if you guys don't know what a prime lens is, so basically prime lenses don't have a zoom, so in order to zoom in you have to physically walk forward, so or towards the thing you're shooting. And in general these lenses have better optical clarity and they are much sharper because they have a lot less glass elements inside of them. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is ISO. What ISO stands for? ISO is basically how sensitive your sensor is to light. So changing this will affect your brightness of your image. So let's shoot a subject right here I have prepared for you guys, and we are going to compare how different ISO settings affect final image. So what you have to do is move your camera to the manual mode, and we're going to hit ISO, and right now we're going to set our ISO at 200, our shutter speed is at 100, and aperture is at 1.8. So I'm going to take a picture of this cactus here. Here's our image. I'm going to show it on the screen right now. Now we're going to change our ISO to 500 and we're going to compare these two. You can tell that the image we have right now is a lot brighter than the previous one. So we're going to move our ISO. Now this is going to be extreme example. Let's say for example at 1600. So keep in mind that if you're setting your ISO too high up, you're going to start to get noise on your photo, like digital noise that doesn't look that good. So try to use as low ISO as possible when shooting to get sharpest images. So as I already have said, we have set ISO at 1600 right now, and we're going to take another image. Now, as you can tell, this shot is really blown out, but keep in mind that even shots like this can be salvaged if you're shooting RAW format, because shooting in RAW allows you to play a lot more with it because it contains a lot more data captured by the same sensor we were talking about previously. So this was result at ISO 1600, and let's really go extreme this time, but we're going to lower our shutter speed so the image doesn't get blown out. I'm going to use this image just as an example of what the noise in the image looks like. So if you take a look, this shot is well exposed, but if we zoom in into a darker areas of the photo, you're going to see that there is a lot of noise starting to show up. So keep that in mind when you're shooting, to not go too high with your ISO. You can use noise reduction in post-processing if you absolutely have to use high ISO, but I recommend shooting at the lowest setting possible. Now you have seen what ISO does. Next I'm going to show you what your aperture does. Your aperture range is going to be highly dependent on what kind of lens you're using. So this is a 50mm 1.8 lens. So what is an F number? So that's a great question, and I'm going to show you right now. I'm back. So this is the other lens I have, and what's cool about it is that Aperture is mechanically actuated. So I'm going to show you how Aperture looks inside of the lens. So let me just zoom in for a second. Okay, so that should be good. So if you take a look in the middle of a lens, as I move this, you're going to see that the opening is getting bigger. So let me zoom in a little bit further. There we go. So you can see. Why is this important? And how this affects your final image. Wait, let me zoom out a little bit more. How this affects your image. So I'm going to show you in an example, and while showing I'm going to talk with you. So the lower the f number, the bigger the opening on your lens is, and thus allowing more light to come in. So you can use faster shutter speed or lower ISO. This lens I'm going to be showing you as an example has an f-stop of 1.8, so it's allowing a lot more light to come in compared to, let's say for example, lens that has a maximum aperture of an f4. How does an aperture affect your photo? So aperture affects your photo in many ways. As I already have said, having the wider opening on your lens allows for more light to come in. But what it gives you as well is it gives you depth of field, or as you have seen in photos, that's like the effect that when you have your subject and like lights in the background that look blurred and look like big balls of light, that's what's called bokeh, or whatever you want to call it. I know I'm not pronouncing it well. It can be pronounced in many ways, but I'm going to call it bokeh. So let's see how it affects your photo. We are going to start off shooting at 1.8 and we are going to progress further down, closing the aperture and seeing how it affects our photo. So if you have your aperture at f1.8, you can expect your background to be blurry. So as we close the aperture down, we start to get less and less depth of field, and after you get to a certain point you will have both subject and background in focus. So let's start at 1.8 and take one picture. So as you can see, the cactus is pretty sharp, but we start to drop off in sharpness pretty quickly. So our background is completely blurred as we expected. Now we're going to close our aperture to f3.2 and take another picture. You can see that the background is blurred a little bit less. We have a bit more of cactus in focus, so it looks a little bit sharper. Every lens has its sweet point where it's the sharpest. For this lens I think it is at around 3.5 if I recall correctly, but I don't tend to think about that too much. I just like to make up the settings on the fly when I'm shooting. So next photo I'm gonna shoot at f5. Now you can see that the background is starting to get more in focus. So let's continue closing it down to about f9. We're going to bump up the ISO as now the opening on your lens is getting smaller and smaller, thus allowing less and less light to come in. So we're going to have to compensate using higher ISO and lower shutter speed. There we go. This one looks better. We do have a lot of noise, but I just want to show you how changing your f-stop affects your final images. So this is at f9 and we're going to take another one at around f18. Now in this shot you can tell that everything is in focus, even the gimbal, and And as you can see, we even shot the subject really up close and we got everything in focus. In basics, that's what an aperture is and how it affects your photos. Next on the list is shutter speed. And it is also very important. Shutter speed is, in theory, in basics, shutter speed is for how long your shutter on your camera is open. So getting faster shutter speed means that you're going to freeze more motion, and lowering your shutter speed means that you're going to have those light trails of the cars that you may have saw before. As I already said, the shutter speed is how long your shutter is physically opened on your camera. So here I have a DSLR. DSLR is basically just a regular camera, but it has a mirror inside of it that bounces the light inside and up through the viewfinder, so I can see what's going on through this optically. So in the mirrorless cameras, this part here isn't optical, but it has a small OLED screen inside that you're looking through. But this one doesn't have it. This one has a mirror and you're looking through the mirror. I'm going to show you how the shutter inside of the camera looks when it's working. Wait. So I don't know if you can see. So that is how it looks. And having long shutter speed means that your shutter is basically being open, allowing light to come in and hit the sensor for a longer period of time, thus making your photos appear brighter. But in order to use long exposure, you're going to need to use a sturdy tripod, as even the smallest movement in the camera is going to result in blurry, like milky images. And sometimes that's a result that you want to get, but most of the time that's a result that you don't want to get. So keep that in mind if you try to shoot long exposures. So let's see how changing your shutter speed affects your photos. So shutter speed is at 200ths of a second, ISO is at 250, and our aperture is at 1.8. And let's take a shot. So here's the picture shot at 200ths of a second, and you can see how it appears to be dark. Now we're going to reduce our shutter speed to 100ths of a second, and we're going to see how that changes our image. So you can see that image already started to appear brighter, so it's more exposed. Now let's reduce it to 1/50th of a second. Keep in mind that when reducing your shutter speed, that you're going to have to keep your arms a lot more steadier than usually. So let's try to take this shot without it getting blurry. So here you see that this photo is pretty well exposed. It is sharp. This is how your shutter speed affects your photo. Knowing each of these three things is the most important stuff that you can learn as a beginner photographer. So exposure triangle, you're going to be hearing about it a lot, and sooner you learn how to use your camera in manual mode, sooner you're going to be a lot more comfortable shooting and basically shooting in any type of lighting possible. That would be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and keep in mind that in future we are going to be talking about a lot more fun stuff. This is the third video in our series, and I was thinking about what should I devote this video to, and I thought that this is pretty important and it should be the topic I cover as soon as possible in our journey. And in the future videos you can expect more daily vlogs, more of behind the scenes. Maybe if you send me some of the photos that you don't know how were photographed, I can take a look at them and try to recreate it and share that experience with you guys. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel if you liked the video, leave a like, and see you in the next episode. Cheers!